shameful part of Canada's history is worse than we thought. The commission tasked with finding the truth behind Canada's residential schools will release its final report next week. But as Jacques Bourbeau reports, the head of the commission is already speaking out, saying it's estimated at least 6,000 children died in these institutions, and it's inexcusable nobody has ever found out the exact number.
Justice Murray Sinclair has spent 6 years listening to the stories of residential school survivors. Today, he shared one of them with an audience at the University of Ottawa.
I developed a scab between my crotch. Somehow it got healed, but I carried that sexual abuse and assault for 49 years.
As the head of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, Sinclair has traveled the country, seeing firsthand the damage inflicted by residential schools. Next week, he unveils his final report. One of his conclusions, he now believes at least 6,000 children died in these institutions, double previous estimates. And he says it's time we find out the exact number.
We think there is a crying need for there to be more research into the question of how many children actually died in the schools.
The fact we don't know that number speaks volumes, says Justice Sinclair.
I think it just shows an uncaring attitude on the part of those in charge of the schools.
The Government of Canada sincerely apologizes.
Residential school victims have heard many apologies from churches and the federal government. But Justice Sinclair says more needs to be done.
You can't simply make an apology and then forget about it.
Sinclair argues the apologies must be renewed, repeated periodically, so we never forget.
As a matter of course, they need to be renewed, and we need to understand. The federal government? It applies to everybody who has responsibility for this.
This week, the head of the Supreme Court said what has happened to Canada's Indigenous peoples amounts to cultural annihilation and genocide.
The objective was take the Indian out of the child. In the buzzword of the day, assimilation. In the language of the 21st century, cultural genocide.
Sinclair uses similar language, saying residential school victims were treated as subhuman. His commission is also tasked with proposing what to do next. His solution? Education.
They'll be taught a more accurate story of the history of this country, and they will grow up understanding that there is a partnership between Indigenous and non-Indigenous people that needs to be respected.
And it was a lack of respect for Aboriginal culture and traditions that lay at the heart of the residential school system. Jacques Bourbeau, Global News, Ottawa.
Roughly 150,000 First Nations, Métis and Inuit children were placed in Canada's residential school system, often against the wishes of their parents. Approximately 80,000 former residential school students are still alive. There are more than 130 residential schools located across the country, and the last residential school shut down outside Regina in 1996.